Well, let me get started, but just welcoming everyone that's already in. And if you're coming in, I just want to take a couple minutes just to say how grateful we are for what you're doing in your part of the world, especially in this season that's been challenging for all of us. I'm so grateful for you, and TSN is here to serve you. So hopefully this event will be something that will both inspire you, but also maybe encourage you and give you some information that might be helpful for the season that we're in with the COVID and everything that's going on. So as we enter into this event, leveraging stewardship and looking at all the things that are happening in our churches, and we have 3 main sessions that we're going to do, and then some breakouts that will follow those main sessions. And then I'll close with just a brief word of encouragement. But just a couple of housekeeping items as we get started. First, as you come in, you are muted. We'd like you to stay that way just during the main sessions. And then when we break into the breakout sessions, which will happen automatically, you'll automatically at the end of the main session be put into a group somewhere between 6 and 8, 9, 10 people, maybe at the most, will be in that group. While you're in the main session, the best experience would be if you stayed on speaker view. That way, whoever is speaking will be on your screen. And then when you go to the breakout session, we recommend gallery view. That way you can see everyone that's in that room. And you will have a leader that will guide the discussion. If by chance somebody is not in your group that takes leadership, then please do so. And there's some information that we've already provided for you to get that conversation started. Please use the workbook that we've provided. You can either download that. Rachel has already sent a link in the chat that you can use. If you haven't had a chance to get that document already, you can get it now. Also, please save your questions for the discussion. The main sessions are just going to be about 15 minutes long, and they're to really give you some information and provide some fodder for you so that as you go to the discussion, you can go deeper into that. So save your questions for that. And then use speaker view during the main sessions, gallery view for the discussion. And then we will mute you when you come back to the main session. So you'll have it to unmute you every time you do the breakout session. So that way you can communicate with each other. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and just dive right into the first session. So I want to introduce the 3 speakers that will be part of our first panel. And that's Chris Goulard. He is a pastor at Saddleback Church in California. And then you have Todd McMitcham. He is from Lifeway Generosity, and he's going to be joining them. And also Rodney Ross, and Rodney is from Life Church in Oklahoma and really all over the country. So we're excited to have these guys share with you on the topic of how giving is impacting our church, the virtual church gatherings today. So guys, take it away. Please enjoy this as they share this information with you.
Thanks, Leo. Good morning, everybody. Great to see so many different faces. I've still got it on gallery view because it's kind of fun to see everybody. Tank, love to see you up in the Northwest. Hope you're doing okay up there. Paola from England, this is fabulous. Hey, Rodney and Todd and I had a great conversation last week talking about some different things. And I think this will be a fun conversation. We've only got 15 minutes, but the idea was to really see what's happening out there. How is giving impacted? What are churches doing that is effective or maybe not effective, either way? Between Todd at Lifeway, who works with many, many different churches, and Rodney, who, you guys have, 800 different campuses now or something like that, but you're all over the place too. And so you guys really are seeing a lot of different things happening out there. So we want to talk about that in terms of what's working, what's not. I think as I talk to people around the country, that's the question that I'm getting a lot of is like, hey, what's going on? What are you guys doing in this season? And so that's kind of what we wanted to dig into. I want to sort of just prime that a little bit for you guys, Todd and Rodney, either one, whoever want to jump in, because there's a few things we talked about. One of the things that, and I think it was Todd, perhaps it was you that said it about knowing your vision. And I'd love to just sort of start with that concept. Like, what did you mean by that? And lead us into that, because I think that'll lead into some other things too.
Yeah, well, I think this year, thank you, Chris, and Leah for letting me be a part of this first. But I think, if we think back to when COVID hit, it was obviously a massive distraction. It didn't take long for us to figure out the 2020 Vision Launch Series in January. It was a way off, right? It was way off into what we were going to experience. And so when it happened, the churches that did not have, this was our experience with those that we coach and serve, and even those we don't, those that did not have a really clear vision kind of lost their way. in the middle of it, just trying to figure stuff out. Those that actually had a very clear vision really were able to hit the gas, right? And they saw generosity thrive and ministry doors open to them. So having a powerful vision that was pre-driving your organization and church didn't change when the massive distraction occurred.
So, Rodney, you guys have done some, I mean, you were already sort of primed for COVID before anybody else in some senses, because your church is really, in a lot of ways, a virtual church already. But what do you, I mean, I guess I'd love to sort of see, one of the comments you had made is that a lot of our data baselines are invalid this year. So, the numbers have changed, everything, the way we measure things has changed. What are some of the best things that you're sort of seeing that you're finding to be effective? Just go ahead and share whatever you feel like it.
Yeah, man, thanks, Chris. Yeah, we love data, and so we've always tracked data. And what we found is a lot of our data was based on attendance. And so when all of a sudden, we weren't able to have physical services, all of our normal baselines and measurements suddenly were ineffective. And so we've had to figure out, man, how do we measure data? How do we determine if we're winning using a brand new baseline? So we had to do some pivoting really quickly. And, really what we've seen is, kind of like Todd was talking about, we really found that we just had to continue to lead with vision. And so while we pivoted away from physical services and to virtual services, we just continued to lead with the same vision that we always had been, just in a virtual environment. And man, COVID really presented a lot of opportunities. It definitely was a distraction, but man, there were a ton of opportunities. And so what we've tried to do is just take advantage of that opportunity. And really, we just saw people wanted to be generous. I think that's really what the church has always been really good at, is responding to adversity, responding to challenges. And we just found that we had a lot of people that wanted to act on generosity, and they wanted to give generously. So one of the first things we did that was really successful for us was we spun up a new restricted giving category that we called COVID-19 response. And that just gave a very practical way for people to give in response to that feeling of, man, the world's confusing right now. I just want to help. How do I do that? So it was a very practical action step people could take. And so we used that as a new baseline. We were able to start measuring giving to that fund from scratch, and that was very helpful.
Actually, we've done something similar, which we've had a relief fund for a long time. So whenever that could be after a hurricane, it could be whatever. But the focus around this season, of course, has been COVID, and for us, that's been a lot of food distribution and that kind of stuff locally, and actually even some things helping other churches. So for us, we did something similar. And in our conversation, one of the things that came out last week is the idea that this actually has been a generosity season. And one of the things that's been really fun for me is, as going into it, my first concern, of course, maybe this is my financial planning background or whatever, but I sort of got really concerned about, oh my gosh, people are going to be hurting, they're going to lose jobs, and giving is going to go down. And what we've experienced is actually not that. Giving to the general fund, if you will, I would say is about on target, about where it was. So it hasn't dropped, which is frankly amazing in a lot of senses. And yet we also have this designated fund, just like you do, Rodney, where, it's focused on relief in the food pantries. And it's absolutely been awesome to watch people step up and really be generous, that they weren't even on our radar. Like, they're coming out of the woodwork and going, hey, how can I help? So do you guys want to speak to that a little bit? Are you seeing that also, everywhere, or is that?
Yeah, so I'll jump in there. The churches that prior to COVID practiced good stewardship and good generosity were able just to keep on rolling. And we actually saw virtual attenders become very rapid givers. So when churches already had the practice of spending less than you earn, take in your budget, and already had a practice of how we speak generosity and we give for the sake of, and we talk about it for the sake of the giver, not for the sake of the church need. They already had all those super highways already built, so they could just keep on tracking, and it engaged people even easier. We have heard of a lot more churches giving 110% of their budget this year than we've heard of those suffering.
So actually more doing better than are doing worse.
Yeah. So we were initially afraid. That's because all we heard was about really the 1% and all the fears. And people really started living generously immediately because we knew coworkers who were losing their jobs or getting sick, and there were needs around us. So we just started living generously. And the churches that were ready for that gave us the channels to do it.
Fabulous. So let me just kind of look at those that maybe are struggling a little bit, because I'm sure there's some people on the call that are sort of feeling a little frustrated or whatever. What are things that they can start doing now, like maybe strategies to engage people, to get them going? How can we start to shift that conversation in a way that's meaningful in this season? And either one of you guys, feel free to jump in.
So Rodney, I'll let you take that one since I just spoke, but maybe speak a little bit about that, how we talked about like focusing on one thing, right? The one thing, like your church focused on the app giving, because that was already really strong for you.
Yeah, that, we had, for a long time, we wanted to drive people that give to our Life Church app. And we wanted that for several reasons. But when COVID hit, we just stopped talking about other giving methods and really focused on app giving. And so that just was a consistent message. Anywhere people were going to hear about giving to Life Church, it was a really easy conversation. Hey, just download the Life Church app. It's easy to give. We built that and streamlined that experience to be really fast, really easy. And just that consistency in messaging really made it, really had a great response to that. We had more people download the app than ever. We had more people give through the app than ever. Overall, giving we've been blessed. We're one of those churches where giving has been up pretty significantly. And we attribute a lot of that from that just consistent messaging of here's how you give. I've talked with a couple of churches that kind of struggled with their messaging a little bit because they tried to do a lot of different things. They tried to add giving for the first time. They tried to add, giving through PayPal or through some unique way. And it really clouded the messaging because instead of just saying, hey, give this simple way, and here's the vision and the why, really focusing on vision, they had to take up a lot of the communication real estate to explain the new technology or the new methods. And that really, I think a lot of that was really challenging for several people that I talked with.
So in the offering time, don't tee up like, oh, here's 6 ways you can give, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. So for us, Chris, we immediately got thousands of calls. Everybody wanted text giving because they just thought that was going to be the silver bullet. Well, text giving isn't the easiest way to start your digital giving journey, depending on your provider. And so the point isn't get an app. The point is make sure you have one way that you really lean into, and it's really easy for the giver because they're the one you're trying to get to follow the act, and lean into that one thing and do it really well before you lean into the second thing.
So, okay. So if we're going to focus on one thing, what would be, Rodney, for you guys, that's the app. For a lot of churches, they may not have an app or something like that. So if you're going to start with one thing, what would you suggest that be, Todd?
By far and away, the easiest way to make a digital gift is with an online platform, but it must be mobile optimized today. It just has to be. It has to be a great mobile experience so it feels like an app if you don't have an app. But it far outweighs every other way people are giving digitally.
So for those that don't have that, that's something that you'd really prioritize putting in place, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And once you have a mobile optimized page, it can lead to a whole lot of other things. But in this world, you can do a mobile optimized page that does a single gift without having to log in, a recurring gift without having to create a login. You can donate a non-cash item like a car or ring without having to log in. And you can be remembered with our modern technology without ever having to create a login. So when you come back to that page, you're set up.
Because you got cookies, right? So it just kind of takes you right in.
Absolutely. The majority of gifts coming these out. Mobile giving, the last stat I saw before COVID, had increased by over 200%. That's how many people are making gifts on their phones.
Yeah, it's interesting. We saw a little bit of transition because there were still a lot of people used to writing checks, especially some of the older folks. And, they were all of a sudden at a loss of like, okay, I'm watching online. They figured that piece out. But then it's like, I'm used to writing a check and putting it in the basket as it comes by. Now what do I do? Can I come drive? Literally, can I drive to the church and drop off a check? I started getting questions like that. So people were trying to figure this thing out. I think we're sort of past that season, probably. But one of the things we talked about is, okay, knowing that some are starting to go back to live services at our church. Rodney, you guys have been doing it now for a few months. We're sort of saying it's still not going to happen anytime in the next couple of months, partly because it's California and partly because we're just, our services are very big and trying to get everybody together is difficult. But that said, there were some ideas that came out in our conversation last week about optimizing, or not optimizing, but just kind of being a little bit more effective in using the offering time in the service. And one of the things that I thought was super simple that we are not doing, but I'd love to hear your feedback on that is, kind of the old school, let's move the offering up before the message. And I can't remember one of you guys said it, and I thought that's pretty cool. But are you seeing a lot of that, just sort of shifts in that and just kind of focusing on it?
Yeah, we definitely shifted. We had shifted prior to COVID to having the offering before the message. And, with virtual services, that's really helpful because, most people that join your virtual service are there for the message from the senior pastor. That's what they're there for. And so if they've already had that, they're much more likely to leave before getting to the offering call. And so we found that moving the offering call was really beneficial. We were very glad to have it on the front end. And I know Todd had some other thoughts about that too, about multiple ways to include that.
Yeah, one of the things we saw real good success with was encouraging, you have to talk about it multiple times, because when you have streaming viewers, you don't know how long they're staying. And when you had so many guests, we really encouraged pastors when they did their welcome at the very beginning to have a great visionary word about the work your church is doing in the community generously, and make an offering moment right there, right? Tell what your church is doing to help with a COVID problem in your community during your welcome. It's great for your guest relationships, but you also will transfer to giving. Then the second one, as Rodney mentioned, then of course at the end of the service, it's got to be readdressed again, and you always have to have a quick link right there all the time. And don't forget social media all week long. You've got to remind them all week long and create easy opportunities.
So when you say social media, you're talking whether that's Facebook, Insta, whatever it might be, whenever you're communicating something, give an opportunity to do that?
Yeah, because the virtual offering is now 24/7. We used to think of it as limited to the service time. Well, now it's not.
Right.
You get to take it up 7 days a week, so you have to have a 7-day-a-week strategy for it.
One of the other things that came up, we've only got a couple minutes left, but I thought it was really significant, is the idea of using language. And Todd, you kind of led into that a little bit a minute ago. That's good for the person and not budget-based. In other words, so when we're talking about it, we're talking about really from the perspective of the giver, the person, rather than the church itself. So it's, sometimes at CSN, we've always said, like, think about what we want for the person, not from the person in effect. But you talked about sort of changing language so that it would be like from their perspective. I think sometimes in the church, we think of things in our world rather than what does it look like from the person who's watching.
Right. So every
Rodney,
pastor,
if you want to jump in, feel free to, either one.
I'll be real quick and let Rodney jump in here. Every pastor wants recurring gifts, right? So how we saw that strategy work out is there'd be an announcement time. Right? We need recurring gifts, go online, make a recurring gift. Well, that's a lot harder to accomplish. What you really want to do is make your digital giving experience magnetic, so they come back all the time because they want to. So we think about what we need, so we make generosity an announcement, as opposed to thinking about what they really want to experience, which is a great giving opportunity.
So Rodney, how have you guys languaged that, if you will?
Yeah. So with scheduled giving in particular, rather than saying, man, schedule your giving because it's best for Life Church, we say, man, schedule your giving, because we all schedule the things that are important to us. And then we also have brought in language around, man, commit to putting God first in your life. And we can help you do that in your finances by scheduling your giving. And so we really tried to use language that showed it as a solution to just helping people do what they already wanted to do. Put God first in our finances. Man, here's a great, easy way to do that. And so you really position that as a solution rather than stating it in terms of a problem that the church has, like, that we need money. And so that is so, it's so much better received by givers when they realize, man, my church is really just helping me out, do the things that I already want to do.
Right. So in other words, we want to make it really easy for you to be generous rather than focused on why we need the money or something like that.
Exactly.
We're just about up at time here, but there's one question I do want to put out just for either one of you, that kind of post-COVID, because we're in it now, but we're starting to see the kind of the tail end of it, we hope. What are the things that we should be thinking about, not just to be reactive today, but really being proactive, because things are going to be different in the next couple of years? What are you guys seeing, best practices sort of that to tee us up to be set for the next couple of years going forward?
Rodney, I'll let you jump in on that one.
Yeah. One of the things that we've had a virtual campus for years, so we call it Church Online. And we've seen a migration toward that in our culture of people wanting to do church online as opposed to coming to a physical building. That's become more and more common even before COVID. COVID has really just accelerated that trend. And so what we're really thinking about today is, man, how do we just continue to grow that church online as a community? And man, how do we minister to that group? Folks that are never going to set foot in our buildings, how do we pastor them well? How do we lead them well in all areas of ministry, not just giving and generosity, but part of what we're seeing with giving is pretty phenomenal. Our total giving has grown pretty significantly this year, but our giving to church online is growing 3 times as fast.
Wow.
And it's really extraordinary. And so we're just recognizing we have got to find better ways to steward that population. And that's not going to go away once COVID is resolved, whatever that resolution is. That is an ongoing trend. And so I think that is going to be critical for churches to figure out how to serve that community well.
Yeah, that's a good word. I think we're struggling with that too. We've sort of had our online campus for a long time, but we're clearly we've been placing more and more emphasis on it. But like you said, it didn't start the trend, it just accelerated. It was already there. So it's something that I think we need to really be focused on going forward. We're going to need to stop and bring it back together. Leo, I don't know if you want to moderate that. There's a couple things. There's some questions in the workbook. So as we go to breakout time, maybe Leo, you could highlight that. But there's just kind of the basic question Rodney had sort of thrown out earlier was that I always like to ask anyway. What are you, like, what did you just hear this morning, maybe that you could integrate, right? So, and then what's working in your system that you could be doing more of, and what's not working that you can get rid of, so those are the kind of things because our hope today really is that you're going to take some ideas and be able to implement them and really move forward. So as we're having all these discussions, think about what are the take-home ideas.
That's great. Thanks, Chris. And thank you, Todd and Rodney, for your contribution. What you guys have shared has really, really been good. Just love everything you've talked about. And as we break out to the groups, everybody, just remember, unmute yourself and go to gallery view. So we're going to transition to that right now. And you do have the workbook. If you haven't had a chance to download that, there's a link in the chat that you can download it. And then just use those 2 questions to start your conversation. But beyond that, talk to whatever degree you can. And we'll give you a 1-minute warning when your time is up in the group, and then we'll come back to the main session. So enjoy your conversation with everybody. We look forward to seeing you.
Hey, Leo, we didn't, because we were people were just coming on. We didn't pray at the beginning. Would you just pray for everybody as we go to groups?
Absolutely. Sure.
Well,
Father, I thank you so much, first of all, just for what's been shared already. Thank you for these men and for everybody that's in this meeting today, Lord, that we are all have our hand to the plow. We're working in your field. And God, I pray that you would encourage us, that you would give us continued wisdom and knowledge so that we can do better in this field that you put us to work in. So I pray your blessing over these conversations and over the rest of our time. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Well, welcome back, everybody. Thank you for taking the time to discuss. I hope that you are encouraged through this discussion and also informed. We had a great discussion in our group, and I hope you did as well. Let's jump right into our next session. We're going to have Dave Briggs from Central Christian and Blair Graham from the Summit Church in Raleigh-Durham, North Carolina, discuss the topic of adding virtual components to your ministry model. Dave and Blair, take it away.
Very good. Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you. Seeing as we have Paula here from from England. It's evening over there. So glad you could join us. Blair Graham and I are going to spend a little bit of time just talking about some of our experience that we've had as COVID caused us to make some fairly radical and quick changes in the way we conducted our stewardship ministry. Both Blair and I are stewardship pastors. And so we had to deal with this issue of, we're not meeting in person anymore, and what do we do? And so we're going to go back and forth and give you some thoughts about some of the ways that we tried to adjust. First thing that happened to us is we were right in the middle. We have 6 different campuses. We were right in the middle of halfway through FPU and halfway through an 8-week series that we developed locally called 8 Decisions That Determine Your Financial Future. And we were in week 4 when the shutdown occurred. And so we had to wait a little bit of time until we saw that this thing was not just going to be over in 2 or 3 weeks. And so we then had to pick up and do the last half of FPU on Zoom, and then the last half of our 8-week series on Zoom. It was a little clunky as we were trying to figure out how to engage people while we were in Zoom. But I think we did at least provide through Zoom the opportunity to finish up FPU and the opportunity to finish up 8 Decisions as a result. And of course, we learned quite a few things as a result of doing that. So that was the first way in which we had to scramble to decide how we were going to finish both of those in a Zoom environment. So Blair, what were your thoughts, and how did you get thrown into this Zoom environment right away?
Dave, it's funny. I was at the CSN forum with 2 guys from my team in Louisville. And one of the guys was following everything happening with COVID and sharing, because he worked at a university setting, this guy, Art Rayner. And he was saying, man, this is going to be a really big thing. And I'm kind of like, all right, man, I just want to get home. But really, Dave, as soon as we got back, everything changed. We were running an FPU class that was meeting in person, and we had the same experience. And our team kind of scrambled and said, well, let's offer it virtually. And unfortunately, at that point, that was in March, most people dropped out of doing FPU. They did not want to move forward virtually. It's interesting how kind of God had prepared us, I think, for some of these things that were coming. We had a one-on-one financial coaching ministry that we just candidly had a lot of trouble getting people to actually physically meet on the one-on-one method, because we have 10 campuses around our area where we are in the Raleigh-Durham area. And so we had decided to move to a virtual environment for that financial coaching ministry. Huge win going into COVID. The surprising thing for us, Dave, is that I would have assumed that many people would have raised their hand and said, hey, I need financial help. The world is upside down. I'm not sure about my financial situation. But candidly, we've just had a hard time getting people to actually say yes to getting help through financial coaching. So I'd say we're still well positioned to serve people, but honestly, people have just been in this kind of, my perception is I'm kind of stuck in a hole. I'm kind of fearful of what's happening, and I'm not ready to kind of get out of that environment. So that was kind of how we approached it with financial coaching. How about you, Dave? Have you had a similar experience?
Yeah, well, you and I talked about a week ago, and when you told me that, it actually made me feel better, because we'd experienced the same thing. We had positioned ourselves to be able to gear up our coaches to be able to do this onslaught of people that were going to come asking for help. And it was significantly less than what we expected, and it didn't make a lot of sense to us. So the fact that we were not alone in this, and that may be an encouragement to some of the rest of you, that human nature reacted during COVID differently than we expected with regard to wanting to meet with some of our financial coaches. And I don't think it's because they didn't need it. I don't think it's because they didn't trust us. I think it's because COVID just messed with them, and they just went into lockdown, and this was just one more thing that they weren't ready to engage in. So again, your discouraging word was very encouraging to us that we were not alone in this issue.
Yeah, that's great. Go ahead, Dave.
I just say we did prepare, though, our coaches to help people with what we called the 90-day 4-bucket financial strategy. And what we did was we identified how could we help people specifically navigate the first 90 days of this financial shock. And so we came up with a 4-bucket strategy that every one of their expenses got put into one of those 4 buckets. Bucket number 1 would be fixed costs that you really can't do much about. Bucket number 2 would be really important expenses that you can't get rid of, but you could cut back on, like groceries and things like that, electricity, where you could do some things. Bucket number 3 would be all those expenses which are important, but for the next 90 days, you could completely eliminate them, like buying clothes and things that you could just put away for 90 days. And then finally, bucket 4 would be those things you're just going to cut out immediately, so that they would have a strategy to be able to save and conserve as much during the first 90 days of COVID. And there were few people that engaged with that, and I do think that that was helpful to some, but it was a way in which we tried to adjust to the current reality by giving people a strategy for dealing with the first 90 days.
Yeah, that's great. I think one of the other things too, Dave, that was really helpful as we were assessing how do we do ministry differently now. One of the partners that we work with who's on this call, financial planning ministry, and they focus on helping with estate planning. Clay Perkins and his wife, Sandra, you may know him today as Sandra's iPad 4 from his Zoom handle, Sandra's iPad 4, that's Clay over there. But they reached out to us and they said, hey, we're actually offering our partners the opportunity to do a webinar for the estate planning seminar rather than the in-person meeting. What do you think about that? And we had been struggling with getting our 10 campuses to actually come to the estate planning seminars because they're just spread out around the triangle. And I said, Clay and Sandra, this could be a perfect thing for the Summit Church, because in essence, we're struggling with childcare, with transportation time to get there, with physical location and proximity. And so we decided to test drive the virtual estate planning seminar, I think at the beginning of June. And it was a huge success for us. In fact, it was so good that we said, hey, that's actually what we're going to plan to do, if you're okay with it, for our future estate planning seminars, at least for the time being, because it seemed really effective. We have a pretty young congregation, and we perpetually struggle with childcare issues. And when you host one of these kind of in an evening, late evening time, when they can put kids to bed or put them in front of a show, it just has created more opportunities. So that was a big win. I think you had a similar experience with that, Dave. Tell us about that.
Yes, we had a live seminar from Financial Planning Ministry planned before COVID hit. And then we got with our friends at FPM, converted that over to a virtual online. And I agree with you, Blair. It was a wild success. We have 6 campuses, and from one of our campuses to another of our campuses, about an hour-and-a-half drive. And so when we put one of these on, we usually did it in one of our larger campuses and forced people to drive sometimes an hour to attend the seminar. And now they're attending their seminar, like you say, no childcare issues, in the comfort of their living room. And they just did a fabulous job. And
Dave, I think we might have lost you there. I don't know. Did you guys hear what Dave was saying? Dave, are you there?
Dave's sound just dropped off. Dave, check your microphone.
Sorry about that.
Oh,
Dave,
you're back.
You're back.
Sorry about that. The point was that it worked out so well. I think this is something we may do in the future, particularly because we were able to include far more people, to your point.
Yeah, that's great. I think another tool that was really helpful for us is several years ago, we just recognized that a lot of our people were not interested in actually attending a 9-week class, like kind of the Dave Ramsey style. There's just a big pushback to like, it's too much time. I want something instant. I just want it personalized to me right now. And so we realized our ability to gather people in kind of larger chunks of time was dwindling. And so we developed this tool called the Stewardship Digest. And it's simply kind of an online email newsletter that goes out once a month. And there's a lot of people even on this call that curate some really great content and resources. And we just said, what if we were to take kind of the best things each month, send them out, and then use it as a way to kind of share what events we're doing. Hey, we're doing financial coaching or FPU or estate planning. And so what's interesting is during COVID, that has been a very well-received resource at our church. I feel like that's been a way where I've had much more success with getting a member to spend 30 seconds or 2 minutes or 10 minutes reading a newsletter and clicking into a couple articles than I can to get them to come to a 9-week class or maybe even an hour seminar. So that's been a big win. We're trying to leverage that more. And even things like this, a webinar, we're trying to figure out how do we get content to them in new digital ways. What's worked for you, Dave, in that regard, or what are you seeing?
Well, we've all lost a lot as a result of COVID, but we've also gained some things. We've gained some new areas that we were forced to kind of think through in the midst of COVID that we might not otherwise have come up with. And one of the things that we settled on that we're in the process of really pushing out now is what we call money clips. And we decided rather than exposing people to an hour or 2-hour seminar, we're going to take 10 to 12 minutes and we're going to focus on 1 or 2 key concepts. And we're going to send those things out maybe once a week or once every 10 days or so to give people the opportunity in 10 or 12 minutes to really focus on a key aspect that might very well expose a lot of this material to people who simply won't give you an hour and a half or 2 hours or 8 weeks, but they will tune in for 10 or 12 minutes to be presented with a stewardship idea that they can kind of think about. And so we've got a few of those in the can. We're actually going to be releasing money clips in the next few days. And I really think this is an opportunity for us as a result of what we learned through COVID to potentially reach more people with a quicker message.
Yeah, I love it. I can't wait to see the money clips. I'm wondering if I can just send them to my church members, Dave, once you figure this out for all of us. I'm glad you're doing that.
The other thing, and I know you may have had a similar situation, we've determined that some of our volunteer training can be best done either in a combination of live and video or completely in video. We'll have training sessions, again, with 6 campuses trying to have people drive to a central location to do training. Some of that you want to continue to do in person. We want to do some role playing, which we're going to continue to do in person. But I think a hybrid where some of the more fundamental information-based training can best be done video, and then you can bring people together to do the kind of role playing and in-person kind of things that you want to do. I'm not sure we would have moved in that direction if it wasn't for COVID, but I think COVID has shown us a potentially more efficient way to do some of that training. And when you can record it, a person who can't make the initial meeting as an opportunity to go back and watch it and be caught up with everybody else. So that's something we've gained. The other thing that's worked out better is the ability to have interviews with new volunteers that can be done at a much more convenient time than trying to meet in person. So again, even though we've lost a lot of things, I think we've learned some things that will continue even after we can meet in person. And again, I know you've discovered some of those things as well, Blair.
I love it. Well, let's do this. We're going to move into a discussion time here. Leo, do you want to introduce the questions?
Yeah, happy to. So thank you again, Blair and Dave, for just your insight. I think all of us can resonate with different things that you guys have said. that yes, we've had some challenges, but we've also had some opportunities. And I think it's opened up opportunities for us to reach people that we potentially would never have, or would have been much more difficult to do so. So as you break out to your groups, again, switch over to to gallery view, and then also unmute your button. And then here's the questions that we're going to go over. What's one program that you've been able to convert to a virtual format, and what benefits and potential challenges are there to offering virtual content? So let's take 15 minutes for this breakout session, and we'll come back. So enjoy your time together. Welcome back. I see most of you are back. I hope you enjoyed that conversation. I certainly did. This virtual environment that we're forced to adapt to has really been, I think, more of a benefit than it's been a challenge, but it's been a tremendous benefit, and I hope you see that. As we get ready for the next session, I just want to introduce the two speakers that will be discussing what they're facing, but also speaking really to us about some of the challenges that they're facing and some of the recommendations that they would make. So Steve Carter is one of our board members. He is from Louisville, Kentucky. If you've been to the last forum, you know that's his home church. He hosted us, and hopefully we'll be there in a few months in person. Let's pray for that, guys. And then also Donna Nicholson-Stief. She's from LCBC in Pennsylvania. So Steve and Donna, would you take us in this next section, talking about leveraging social distancing to increase our engagement with our people?
Yeah, really happy to do that, Leo. And Donna and I are pumped to be able to be with you guys for a few minutes today and share just some of our experiences as stewardship leaders in our churches, just like you. And, really just want to follow on what Dave and Blair kind of teed up, right? That COVID has sort of forced us to find some digital and virtual ways to engage people in stewardship. And, what I'm finding, and Donna and I will talk about this, it's just a positive thing more than anything, right? It's helped us broaden our ministry in a way that we needed to do even before COVID. One of the scripture passages really challenged me in this time has been from Ephesians 5, where it says, be careful how you live, make the most of every opportunity. And it's just, that verse has just resonated with me in this season, to just quit complaining about all the obstacles of not being able to gather in person, but start seeing some of those obstacles as opportunities. How do I make the most of this, right? People are in need right now in unique ways. They're in a unique place and position. They're not coming to church, but they're home. What is that? How do I make the most of that, right? And so part of what Donna and I are going to do is just kind of share some of what we've learned and experienced through that. And Donna, I know from talking to you, you've experienced there's been some real opportunities in this digital thing, right? In moving ministry to virtual and digital. Would you be willing, Donna, to kind of share with us, for LCBC, how much digital ministry were you doing before COVID? And then as COVID came around and people got locked down and shut down, as a stewardship leader, how did you respond? What did you begin to think about and do as it related to that?
Yeah. Thanks, Steve. So fortunately, we had a strong online presence. We had a strong digital team prior to COVID. We were kind of heading in that direction, but COVID just threw everyone into a tailspin. I love a great problem because there's always an opportunity in there. That's kind of my motto. And I also feel like God just kind of like is breaking the mold we've created with church. And so, we always talked about how do we get people to come to church, and God's like, no. How are you getting church to the people? Let's bring church to the people. So, so I've enjoyed it. We've seen attendance wise for some of our virtual classes, classes that we would do on site that we converted over to online. We had record-breaking attendance. It's been fantastic. We've modified some of our other standard classes like FPU, for example. FPU is 9 weeks typically, and our campus pastors were saying, hey, our people don't want 9 weeks. They need something now. So we said, let's do it accelerated. Let's get 9 weeks into 5 weeks and offer it online. And we've just seen a lot of wins with doing things virtually.
Yeah. Me too. I think that we started recognizing that people can engage through these digital tools, right? Things that we never thought would work in the past. We're starting, once you're forced to do it, you start saying, hey, let's all get online. And we said, let's figure this out. And the more we did it, the more we realized there's some really cool things that can happen when you're online in these situations, and some things you can start doing when you're sort of forced to do it differently in that way. And Donna, I know, it sounds like you've already shared a few of the things you've done to make some pivots in your stewardship ministry. Would you mind running through what are some of the different digital tools and platforms you're using, right? Not just talking about the classes you're doing, but what are there some various digital ministry tools and platforms you're using? What are those like?
Yeah. Well, so Zoom, like today, has been a real win, especially breakout sessions. I love that you can take a large class like this and break it down into smaller groups to have smaller discussions. One of the things that we did is we have an e-communication, an e-newsletter, and I think Dave and Blair talked a little bit about theirs as well. When COVID hit, and ours is called Money Matters, and so it's obviously stewardship centered around stewardship. But when COVID hit, we thought, let's add a video and a verse of the month, and let's really make sure we're ministering to people and pastoring them through this, and not just giving them prescriptive, how to do your budget, and here's a great article on saving during COVID, and all those things are great. But we said, what, let's do some verses on fear. Let's do some verses on trusting God in times of uncertainty. And we'll tie in money, because trusting God with our money is part of fully trusting God. Very easy to tie that into it. And so that has been, we started that in March. And that has been each month our top clicked link is our actual verse of the month and our video. So that goes out to about 6,000 people. We've had a good click rate with it, open rate. And we've had good feedback on just that one part, the discipleship.
Well, Donna, would you say you've actually seen that click rate increase during this season?
It has. We watch it we check our dashboard every month, and yes, so more are subscribing to it. But our discipleship video has increased and held steady with top open rate out of all of the links.
So you've done Zoom for classes, and you use the breakout group feature. You do a monthly email newsletter to your community that's engaged. Anything else you're planning to do or have been doing digitally to get people engaged in stewardship?
Two things. One, to reach more people is we're building our stewardship Facebook page. So we have our LCBC page, student min, all those pages have been built. We're building a stewardship Facebook page, and I'm very excited. So if anybody out there is doing that, if you're looking to have your own stewardship Facebook page or Instagram page, what's cool about that is it really broadens your reach. So it's public. So you're going public facing. Anybody can see it, join it, subscribe to it. But you can also add content that kind of maybe you weren't even thinking of. Like I think of subcategories like college kids and how to avoid debt, and kid ministry and how to be generous, and people that are in a season of their life for FPM. And just target them in different meaningful ways. So expanding who we're reaching has been a fun thing to think through.
That's good. That's really good. I'm thinking I've been using a lot of Zoom myself for ministry. We started a monthly webcast for business leaders in the community, as so many businesses were being disrupted by the virus. And we just said as a church, how can we reach out and serve them and encourage them in a tough season like this? And so that's been a really great way to do that, right? Everything in us wanted them to come, to the building so we could be face to face and love on them. But the reality was we had to find a different way to do it digitally. And we thought, I don't know if this will work, but it actually has been better probably because the busy business leader can click on at noon, be done at 1, and be back to his or her work. And if they had to drive to the church, my sense is we'd have less engagement than we have had through using the digital and Zoom environment. So sometimes I think, we see the gains of just the feeling of being face-to-face being so much better. But from a convenience standpoint, from a feasibility standpoint for certain people, this is just way better for them and their schedule, and they'll engage. I heard somebody, Donna, recently say the best question a leader can ask in a time of crisis like this is, what does this all make possible? And so what I'd love to do is hear you talk a little bit about what you've recognized this has made possible as you've shifted your ministry to digital and virtual environments. Have you seen like opportunities? You've already talked a little bit about like your e-newsletter click rate is increasing during this time when people aren't coming to church, right? But what else have you seen these digital tools actually increasing engagement in stewardship over what you were doing in person?
Yeah, what's been pretty cool is with having 15 campuses, when you have something really great to host that's typically on site, like FPM was, pretty much on site. But now it's because you can do it virtually. We're engaging all 15 campuses in courses that normally they wouldn't all be able to attend. People aren't going to drive 3 hours, for a session or a class every week. So we've been able to really rally the troops and have them all participate in one class together. So we've really, really enjoyed that. In so many ways, when this first hit, we kind of felt like we're flying the plane and building it at the same time, trying to figure this all out. One of the real liberating things, we were just talking about this on our last breakout session, is I don't know about your church, but here prior to COVID, any type of video content, it was always professionally produced. Our communications team, our digital team, the lighting, the this and the that, and you had to get on their schedule, and it might have taken 3 months to get it done. And it was a limitation we didn't even know was a limitation. It was just the way it was. Now, not only do we have the liberty to produce our own videos and content, but it's actually preferred. People have responded really well to that authentic, we were just talking about this, the authenticity that comes through a video that, we're producing good videos. They're not shoddy, but they're certainly not overproduced like they normally would be. I don't watch late night TV, but Jimmy Fallon did, I think, his first COVID show from his kitchen or something, and it was like the biggest hit. And I think that just showed you don't have to be so overproduced. You can do what's good enough to move on, and then enhance it as you go.
I would agree, Donna. Like, just thinking about the resources that it takes to do some of the things we do on campus, right? That when we do it digitally, it just uses a lot less resources, and yet you accomplish really the same goals in many ways, right? Even just thinking about building and lights and coffee and donuts and all those materials you print out, and somehow it's all working really well to just give them digital materials, and they're just joining you online and eating their own snacks at home or whatever, right? So and just what you said about lowering the bar of expense and resources to be able to produce a video about stewardship, right? And everybody's okay with it, and it seems to be working, and it's effective. So that's really good. We think about the videos being pushed out, it feels very one way, right? And I think you said to me last week that Nona Jones, who's works with Facebook, said content is king, but engagement is emperor, right? Yep. And so how do we get two-way interaction to take place in these virtual environments? It seems like that would be a downside to digital, but have you found ways to get people to give feedback and to interact?
Yes, we have. So that's a big thing for me. When you think about your inbox, we've got all kinds of stuff waiting for us and good stuff waiting for us in our inbox. And with Money Matters, I just didn't want that to be one more e-communication sitting in your inbox. We wanted it to really have a community feel. We wanted you to feel like it was really for you, the individual, and we solicit feedback. So for example, a real easy one is money hacks. We ask our Money Matters audience, hey, and it's real easy. You see the money hack and then you just click, I've got a money hack and I'd love to share it. And so people give us their money hacks all the time. And what's neat is they're then featured in the next Money Matters article. So Steve Carter from so-and-so gave us this money hack, and then your picture and then what your money hack is. And we have it kind of framed in our a logo setting. And it's just fun. People, they want to be part of it. And so we will get that feedback from them. And then we also have on there, I want to volunteer, or I want to be financially coached. All of that's on there. So we're getting, that feedback as well. But we do the same thing with our financial coaches. And actually we've broadened that to reach our benevolence team, and our FPU volunteers as well. So we took an idea of what we were doing for one financial category, financial coaches, broadened it to include all financial care volunteers, and created content just for them. We call it Take 3. And so it's a video where we'll interview other volunteers. And it's a short video. We capture the 3 takeaways in it, and then we ask them to please content. You can ask them to comment right there on the video. So there's like a comment section, and that just feeds back to us. And so that's just another interactive way we're staying plugged in with our volunteers as well.
With your volunteers, right? Oh, that's a really good way to do that. And frankly, what you're seeing is that's something you're doing today that if you'd had to wait for your quarterly or monthly meeting, it would have been, right? You would have missed out on those opportunities to just push out these sort of what's working for you, share what, your best practices, and now everybody gets to engage, right? And all of us have had, we wish we could get 100% attendance at every one of our volunteer trainings, right? But we don't. But now there's a higher click rate of those that are willing to take the 5 or 10 minutes and watch a little training to make them better financial coaches or benevolence mentors or whatever that might be. Really creative stuff, Donna. I would love to keep going. I know Leo is going to want us to transition back into our breakout groups and spend some time. But thanks, Donna, for sharing your experiences.
Thank you.
And I think we're going to, really unpack this in our breakout groups, right, Leo? And I think we've got 15, 20 minutes to do that. There's some discussion questions, on page 9, I think?
Page 7.
Page 7
of your workbook. Okay. So let's go ahead and transition to that. Thank you so much, Steve. Thank you so much, Donna. You guys have shared some great nuggets, and it made me excited because I think we have a better opportunity to reach more people through this. So let's go to our discussion. We'll do 15 minutes this time, and then I'll come back to close. Please stick around to the end. We have a couple of announcements we want to make. And also, I really want to pray over everyone because I believe this is really an important season for all of us. We have some great opportunities to expand God's kingdom and help people understand finances from a biblical perspective. So please stick around for that. But let's go ahead and break out to our session and switch over to the galley view and unmute yourself. Welcome back. We had a great conversation that just cut off way too short. So I know you probably feel the same way. I'm sorry if your conversation got cut off short. As we close, we just have about 7 more minutes before we end this event. And I just want to recognize everybody that's contributed to the conversation, all of you, but also specifically our speakers as they've shared some of their experience with us. I hope you've really gotten some great nuggets from today's discussions and that you could use some of that. I really encourage you to take the workbook that we've put together for this event and really go through those questions, answer some of those questions for yourself and for your congregation so that potentially you could take some of the things that you've learned, pivot some things, increase some things, use some things, borrow some things, steal some things, that's okay. we love to share the things that we have available. So please reach out to any of us if you have any questions or want additional information about anything that was talked about today. And I just want to close with just a word of encouragement. You know, I have really been keeping my ear to the ground as far as how's the church doing in this season. And not only how's the church doing, but how are we as people doing? And I've seen two different things that are affecting people tremendously. And I think this is why, as a opportunity, we have the greatest, I believe, opportunity to increase this topic and this the ability to really talk about stewardship and increase our effect in our church, in our personal churches, but also broader than that, because we can have a bigger audience than just those people that we minister to directly. So we've seen some things happen in our nation. Obviously, this pandemic has brought on some unique challenges, and really, I would say probably the one word that describes that all of us can relate to is uncertainty. There's just a lot of uncertainty. We don't know when this is going to end. We don't know what it's going to look like. We all hope that we'll go back to some kind of form of normal, but we don't even know if that's possible. And what I'm praying for is that we don't wait for things to go back to normal, that we pivot and change and push forward, because this is a great opportunity that we all have. So I've seen two things. One, I've seen the individual picture, and I've also seen the church picture. The individual picture, we see more and more people struggling financially. And I think we haven't really seen the effects of that yet, because there's been a safety net, especially for us here in America, that the government has, and the central bank and all the stimulus that's happened has created a safety net for a while. But that's about to expire. And as it does, I think we're going to see more of the reality of how financially this will impact people. That's going to make them motivated to listen to the message that we have to bring. And also churches have seen a significant drop in giving. Now, we've heard some testimonies today of some churches that have really done very well and have seen an increase in giving. And I hope that most of you have experienced that. But the reality is that the statistics say otherwise. 56% of all overall churches have seen a decrease in their giving. That's a tremendous amount of churches that have been impacted in a negative way. 70% of churches with people between 750 and 1,500 have experienced a decrease. And then 72% of churches that are over 10,000 people. So this has impacted everyone individually, but also churches. And guess what? That means that they're going to be more open to what we have to say in relation to biblical stewardship and how God can bring in the answer. Because money's not the answer. We know that. What's the answer is God. And we know that God can provide both the resources, but also obviously his word and that relationship that he offers to each individual, because he wants us to trust him rather than trusting ourselves. So we have a large percentage of individuals and churches feeling the pinch, and they're looking for answers. And that's what I believe God has prepared us for. I think we are specifically designed and passionate and called for this season. So I'm just excited about that. And I just want to share a quick thing. The other day I was creating some content, I was writing something, and I kind of hit into this place where I felt like it just doesn't feel right. I can't come up with the right words. And my insecurity kind of came up to the surface. I know I'm not alone in this. You don't have to raise your hand, but I know we all struggle because we're communicating, we're putting ourselves out there when we're trying to communicate something that we really care about. And in the midst of that, I felt like my thoughts started turning to, will anybody like it? Will anybody read it? Will anybody care? Should I be doing this? Right? And I think all of us feel that. But then God reminded me of a scripture in Hosea 4:6, and it says that my people perish for lack of knowledge. And I was just, my faith was renewed because I realized it doesn't matter how I feel. I can deal with my insecurities and I'll deal with them as they come. But I do know that I'm called. I know that I have a purpose, and I know that the message that God's put in our hearts is tremendously beneficial for this season. And it does have the power to set people free. So I pushed through and I said, I don't care how I feel. I know will serve someone. So I'm going to do it. If it serves 1 or 1,000, it doesn't matter. I'm going to be faithful with what God's put in my hands. So I want to charge you and I want to encourage you to embrace that kind of a mindset, that if we don't do our part, if we're not faithful to what God's called us, people will remain in bondage. Marriages will be affected in negative ways. We're going to see people straddle with debt, jump into materialism and hope that they'll find the answer. We know that they won't find it there. So I want to encourage us to really take this opportunity and do 3 things. 1, we need to speak up. I know all of us have been challenged to be more engaging with our audience and with our people through virtual means, and to get out there and really do that. So I just encourage you to just make a commitment that you're going to do something. And listen, it's not about being polished. It's about being authentic, and it's about being real. And all of us can do that in many different ways. Number two, I just encourage you to be intentional and consistent. People are very distracted today. Be intentional about serving them, but be consistent, because if you're not consistent, they're going to miss your message and they're not going to benefit. And then third, be biblical. Again, I just want to emphasize that it's not about the money. It's not about finances. It's about our relationship with Christ. It's about people having an eternal life with Christ. And money is going to be that motivator, maybe for many of us has already been, but I want us to leverage that to get people closer to Christ. And if we're biblical, if we're teaching God's financial principles, we'll be able to do that. So I just want to encourage all of you. You are on the front lines of one of the biggest movements that I think the church is going to see in this next decade. And I'm just encouraged by that. But I also want to just commend you for being part of this team, part of this movement. And as we close, I'm going to pray. I'm just going to pray that I'm going to pray for you specifically. I don't know where you are individually, but I do know that some of us are facing challenges, both individually, but also through our churches and our roles at our churches. So I want to pray that God would not only strengthen you where you are, but he'd provide a way for you to overcome and actually increase in the season rather than decrease. So I'm going to pray, and then I'm going to dismiss us with just one announcement before we let you go. So let me just pray first. Father, I thank you so much for our time. I know, Lord, that it's just a couple hours in the middle of the week, but Lord, I am so encouraged by the conversations I've had, but what I've heard, and it makes me so encouraged to know that all these men and women that are serving with me in the trenches, Lord, you've called each one of them specifically for this season. And so, Father, I just ask that you would give them all that they need for this season so that they would have a greater impact in your kingdom. I pray, God, for resources. I pray for relationships. I pray for connections. I pray, God, for favor. I pray that those that are struggling to help their senior leadership of their church to understand the importance of this, that all of a sudden that door would just swing wide open, and that they would have an entry into that relationship to be able to speak boldly, confidently, and Lord, to help their church to embrace a culture of stewardship and generosity. So Lord, I thank you for what you're doing. I thank you that it is your ministry that we're serving in, and that you've counted us faithful and worthy to be part of it. So I just entrust each one of us to you and to your Holy Spirit to guide and direct us as we do this work. We thank you for it. We're grateful for the opportunity, Lord. And we ask that you give us the strength to serve you and honor you well with it. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, thanks again, guys. And the last thing I just want to say is here at CSN, we're going to be making some announcements coming into the future, but we've launched a new website or a refreshed website because we're really going specifically after church leaders. We want to get more church leaders to understand the importance of stewardship ministry. And we really want to forcibly, honestly, go after these men and women so that we can get them to understand how important this is. So you're going to see some of that change happening. There's going to be some additional communication. One of those things that we're going to do as far as from a marketing standpoint and trying to equip these leaders is to have some resources available to them. And all of you have known about our SI workshop. Well, now that's going to be available online. It's open for registration. So if you want to register for it, or you want to go through it, or you want to introduce your pastor to it, this is a great opportunity for you to help them understand that content and understand how SI can help them understand stewardship from a broader perspective. So we really encourage you to do that. Also, there is a discount that you'll find in the workbook to sign up for that online course. And additionally, it's going to launch on the 1st of October, but it is available for you guys to register today, but it will go live on October 1st. So I hope that you will benefit from that and that you'll point some people to it. In the meantime, just know that you're being prayed for, that we love you, and we're here to serve you in any way we can. So if you have any needs that we can serve you with, please don't hesitate. Reach to us. You can email me directly or info@christianstewardship.com, and we'd love to serve you in any way we can. God bless you guys. Have a great rest of your week, and thank you so much for being part of this event. Be blessed.